Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed last week's chapter 1. This week we're going to read chapter 2 of our story, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Glass. Nearly 10 years had passed since the Dursleys had woken up to find their nephew on the front doorstep. Dudley Dursley was no longer a baby, and now the photograph showed a large blonde boy riding his first bicycle, on a roundabout at a fair, playing a computer game with his father, being hugged and kissed by his mother. The room held no sign at all that another boy lived in the house too. Yet Harry Potter was still there, asleep at the moment, but not for long. His Aunt Petunia was awake, and it was her shrill voice that made the first noise of the day. Up! Get up now! Harry woke with a start. His aunt rapped on the door again. Up! She shrieked. Harry heard her walking towards the kitchen, and then the sound of the frying pan being put on and on the cooker. He rolled onto his back and tried to remember the dream he'd been having. It was a good one. There had been a flying motorbike in it. He'd had a funny feeling that he'd had that same dream before. His Aunt Petunia was back outside the door. "Are you up yet?" she demanded. "Nearly," said Harry. "Well, get a move on. I want you to look after the bacon. And don't you dare let it burn. I want everything perfect for my Dudley Waddley's birthday." Ugh, Harry groaned. Dudley's birthday. How could he have forgotten? Harry got slowly out of his bed and started looking for his socks. He found a pair under his bed, and after pulling a spider off, he put them on. Harry was used to spiders because the cupboard under the stairs was full of them, and that is where he slept. When he was dressed, he went down to the hall into the kitchen. The table was almost hidden with all of Dudley's birthday presents. It looked as though Dudley had got a new computer he wanted, not to mention the second television and the racing bike. Exactly why Dudley wanted a racing bike was a mystery to Harry, as Dudley was very fat and hated exercise. Unless, of course, it involved punching somebody. Dudley's favourite punch bag was Harry, but he couldn't catch him very often. Harry didn't look it, but he was pretty fast. Harry had a thin face, knobbly knees, black hair and bright green eyes. He wore round glasses held together with a lot of sellotape because of all the times Dudley had punched him on the nose. The only thing that Harry liked about his appearance was a very thin scar on his forehead, which was shaped like a bolt of lightning. He had had it for as long as he could remember, and the first question he could ever remember asking his Aunt Petunia was how he got it. "It was in a car crash when your parents died," she said, "and don't ask questions." Harry was frying eggs by the time Dudley arrived in the kitchen with his mother. Dudley looked a lot like Uncle Vernon. He had a large pink face and not much neck. Small, watery blue eyes and thick blonde hair that lay smoothly on his thick, fat head. Aunt Petunia often said that Dudley looked like a baby angel. Harry often said that Dudley looked like a pig in a wig. Dudley was counting his presents, and his face fell. 36, he said, looking up at his mother and father. "That's 2 less than last year. Darling, you haven't counted Auntie Marge's presents, see? It's here under this big one from Mummy and Daddy. All right, 37 then, said Dudley, going red in the face. Harry, who could see a huge Dudley tantrum coming along, began wolfing down his bacon as fast as possible in case Dudley turned the table over. Aunt Petunia obviously sensed the danger too, because she had quickly said, and we'll buy you another 2 presents when we go to the zoo. Okay, how's that, Pumpkin? 2 more presents, is that all right? Dudley thought for a moment. That looked like hard work. Finally, he said slowly, so I'll have 39 sweetums, said Aunt Petunia. Oh. Dudley sat down heavily and grabbed the nearest parcel. All right then. At that moment, the telephone rang. Ring, ring. And Aunt Petunia went to answer it while Harry and Uncle Vernon watched Dudley unwrap the racing bike, the cine camera, a remote control aeroplane, 16 new computer games and a video recorder. Aunt Petunia came back from the telephone looking angry and worried. Bad news, Vernon, she said. Mrs. Figgs has broken her leg. She can't take him. She jerked her head in Harry's direction. Every year on Dudley's birthday, his parents took him and a friend out for the day to adventure parks, hamburger bars or the cinema, and every year Harry was left behind with Mrs. Figg, the mad old lady who lives up the street. Now what? Said Aunt Petunia. I suppose we could take him to the zoo, she said slowly, and leave him in the car. I don't want him to come! He always spoils everything, said Dudley. Half an hour later, Harry, who couldn't believe his luck, was sitting in the back of the Dursleys' car on the way to the zoo for the first time ever in his life. Before they left, Uncle Vernon took Harry aside. I'm warning you, he said, putting his large purple face right close up to Harry's. I'm warning you now, boy. Any funny business, any at all, and you'll be in that cupboard from now until Christmas. Strange things often happened around Harry. Once, Aunt Petunia, tired of Harry coming back from the barber's looking as though he hadn't been at all, had taken a pair of kitchen scissors and cut his hair so short he was almost bald, except for his fringe, which he had left to hide that horrible scar. Dudley had laughed himself silly at Harry, but Harry spent the night sleepless, imagining school the next day, where he was already laughed at for his baggy clothes and sellotape glasses. The next morning, however, he had got up to find his hair was exactly as it had been before Aunt Petunia had shaved it off. He had been given a week in his cupboard for this, even though he had tried to explain that he couldn't explain how it grew back so quickly. There was another time Aunt Petunia had been trying to force him into a revolting old jumper of Dudley's, brown with orange baubles. The harder she tried to pull it over his head, the smaller it seemed to become, until finally it might have fitted a glove puppet, but certainly wouldn't have fit Harry. Aunt Petunia had decided it must have shrunk in the wash, and, to his great relief, Harry wasn't punished. Strange things often happened to Harry, but today nothing would go wrong. It was a very sunny day at the zoo, and it was crowded with lots of families. The Dursleys bought Dudley a large chocolate ice cream, and they bought Harry a cheap lemon ice lolly. They ate in the restaurant, and when Dudley had a tantrum because his knickerbocker glory wasn't big enough, Uncle Vernon bought him another one, and Harry was allowed to finish the first. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows all along the walls. Behind the glass, all sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and stone. Dudley wanted to see a huge poisonous cobra and thick man-crushing pumpkins. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Uncle Vernon's car and crushed it into a dustbin. But at the moment, it didn't look in the mood. In fact, it was fast asleep. Dudley stood with his nose pressed against the glass, staring at the glistening brown coils. "Make it move!" he whined at his father. Uncle Vernon tapped on the glass, but the snake didn't budge. "Do it again!" Dudley ordered. Uncle Vernon rapped the glass smartly with his knuckles, but the snake just snoozed on. "Ugh, this is boring," Dudley said, and he shuffled away. Harry moved in front of the tank and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it hadn't died of boredom in this place. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass, trying to disturb him all day long. It was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia hammering the door down to wake you up. At least he got to visit the rest of the house. The snake suddenly opened its beady eyes. Slowly, very slowly, it raised its head until its eyes were on Harry's level. It winked. Harry stared, then looked quickly around to see if anyone was watching. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and winked too. The snake jerked its head towards Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eyes to the ceiling. It gave Harry that look that said, "I get that all the time." "I know," Harry murmured through the glass. Though he wasn't sure the snake could hear him, it must be really annoying. The snake nodded. "Where do you come from?" Harry asked. The snake jabbed its tail at a little sign next to the glass. Harry peered at it. "Boa constrictor, Brazil." Was it nice there? The boa constrictor jabbed its tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. "This specimen was bred in the zoo." "Oh, I see. You've never been to Brazil." Come and look at this snake! You won't believe what it's doing!" Dudley came waddling towards them as fast as he could. "Get out of the way, you!" he said, punching Harry in the ribs. Harry fell hard on the concrete floor. What came next happened so fast, no one could have guessed it. Dudley was leaning right up close to the glass, and then he leapt back with howls of horror. "Ah! Ah!" Harry sat up and gasped. The snake was out of its cage and the glass had disappeared. People were running, screaming out of the exits. "Ah!" As the snake slid swiftly past him, Harry could have sworn he heard a hissing voice that said, "Thanks." The keeper of the reptile house was in shock. But the glass disappeared. Where did the glass go? Dudley could only gibber. Harry was talking to it. Harry was talking to it. Uncle Vernon was so angry he could hardly speak. He managed to say, "Go. Cupboard. Stay. No meals." Harry laid in his dark cupboard. He lived with the Dursleys almost 10 years. 10 miserable years. Harry was alone, and Harry had no one. And that is the end of chapter 2.